We still are not in the clear by any means. The Hawaiian Islands are still in the crosshairs of Hurricane Douglas, still a Category 1 hurricane.
That's right. The winds are still very powerful, capable of doing a lot of damage. We're expecting power outages. We already had some on Maui. We already had some on the Big Island. And slowly, as it starts to clear the Big Island, they're starting to calm down, but they could see some dragging moisture behind it.
Right now, winds 85 miles per hour, gusts of 105 miles per hour, still booking along to the west-northwest at 16 miles per hour. And at the moment, the forecast track is taking it just to the north of the main Hawaiian Islands and uncomfortably close to the north.
Yeah, now this it could wobble anywhere inside of this cone. And Ben, you know, anywhere of this wobble to the south is definitely going to result in some more severe conditions than what we expect.
Yeah, joining us right now is Bob Ballard over at the National Weather Service and Central Pacific Hurricane Center. And Bob, thanks for being able to join us. I know it's been a very busy day, but one of the things that we have been talking about is this track and the strength. What other elements can you tell us about what's affecting this track and how little of a margin could mean a huge difference in what we get?
Yeah, there is a razor sharp southern boundary to this system that we are really hoping to stay away from. That's about, say from the eye, maybe 20 or 30 miles on the south side. That based on looking at radar and the Air Force Reserve hurricane hunters, that is where the really bad stuff is happening with really high destructive winds. So far, we have managed to keep that offshore with relatively few impacts, but we are within the margin of error at 12 hours. That margin of error for us is about 30 miles. And so that's why we're concerned as we watch Douglas continue to go off to the west-northwest. We really hope that it maintains that west-northwest motion, but some of the computer models have been trying to show a little bit of a westward jog later today. We are really on pins and needles, keeping an eye on that. We hope it does not happen, and if it doesn't, then we are going to count ourselves very, very lucky, but we want folks to be ready just in case.
Now, Bob, it's also very disconcerting and concerning that the storm has maintained hurricane strength, and now you guys are expecting it to do so until it leaves our neighborhood.
That's right. Normally, cyclones, tropical cyclones, when they get close to the islands, we'll see them hit the wall of shear. We call it the wall of shear. It rips the thunderstorms and rips the heavy showers right off the circulation, and then you wind up with a much weaker system. In this case, there is shear, and it is starting to encounter that, but the shear is relatively weak. So instead of a fairly quickly weakening system like what we saw with Hurricane Lane when it got close, this one is weakening a lot slower, and it's making a much closer track to the islands. Now, the one saving grace, and I know you folks have been talking about this today, is that we are on the weaker side of the system, and that is our bread and butter right now. That's saving us. But any little jog to the left could put us into some really bad conditions for the afternoon, into the evening, and overnight.
Yeah, like you were saying, Bob, just 30 miles, and that's really not much. That's like the distance between Honolulu and about Haleiwa. Just that little amount of distance from a geographic standpoint will make a huge difference. And so even if it jogs a little bit south, areas like on Oahu at least, Kahuku and Laie and the North Shore, and even for Molokai, basically the island of Molokai, definitely still in the crosshairs if it makes that left turn.
Right. That's how wide our margin of error is right now, that the destructive strong winds are really scraping along just to the northeast of the islands. Now, we have had some gusts already. You mentioned some power outages. I saw that out by Kaena Point, which tends to be kind of windy anyway. They're gusting to about 48 miles an hour. We had a gust on Maui in Upper Kula earlier today of 64 miles per hour. But again, those tend to be pretty windy locations anyway. It's not super unusual, but still more windy than we'd see on a typical trade wind day.
Now, Bob, I've been watching this storm from the onset, and what I've seen over the last couple of hours, the last few images of the storm making that slow twist to the west. And that was expected and that was forecast. But still, that's bringing those severe conditions a little bit closer to Molokai and to Oahu and, maybe even to Kauai, right?
Yeah, and that's why we have this hurricane warning out, because we can't wait until the storm is almost on top of us to issue hurricane warnings. If we did that, you wouldn't have time to get ready. So in this case, we issue hurricane warnings in advance so that we're telling you that a hurricane is going to get dangerously close to the islands and that hurricane conditions are expected. But whether or not that they impact the island directly, or maybe they scrape us just offshore and we get lucky, that's too close to call. And so in order to give you the time you need to prepare, that's why we issue the warnings as far out as we do.
And Bob, when we, a little bit earlier, you were talking about 16-foot swells at a buoy that's just to the north of Kahului. And we were talking with Chelsea Davis a couple of hours ago, and it was relatively calm, but we're seeing live pictures from Kahului Harbor now, where the waves are really starting to come in, and those waves are also increasing for portions of Oahu. Basically, a 16-foot swell out at that buoy outside of Kahului Harbor basically means we're starting to get some of that swell and possible surge that we're looking at right now.
Right. These are not, beautiful North Shore barrels. This is, like I've heard guys say before, victory at sea type stuff, where it's all short period, messy, multiple swell directions kind of coming in, and so it's not really pretty surf. It does have the potential, though, to be destructive, especially along the vulnerable east-facing shorelines. So along the highway there on the east side of Oahu. That's a place where the road gets really close to the shore. We may see some erosion. We may see some localized problems. So we want folks to be aware of that. And especially if Douglas makes a little bit of a westward turn today, then conditions are going to get much worse along the east sides very quickly. So it's something to really be on your toes and be ready to take action if you need to today.
Now, Bob, we haven't talked much about the storm surge, and according to everything that we've read in releases that you guys put out, advisories you put out, you're still expecting a storm surge, maybe up to 3 feet?
Yeah, it's possible that if we get that closer in approach with Douglas, then we're going to see more water pile up, and that's where we're talking about 2, maybe 3 feet of storm surge. Now, that's in addition to the high battering waves. You get that extra water level rise in terms of storm surge, and of course that's getting into areas where there isn't normally water. So 2 to 3 feet, and this is not still water. This is like sloshing, angry water that is working on structures. Things like that can be really dangerous. You don't want to be out in that, walking through it or driving through it or anything like that. It's incredibly dangerous. So we lose a lot of lives in hurricanes to storm surge. And in fact, sometimes that's the most dangerous thing about the hurricane. So we want folks to pay attention. Remember, the ocean is not your friend when you've got a hurricane in the vicinity.
All right, Bob Ballard from the Central Pacific Hurricane Center. Always good to see you when time's good and bad, but in this case, especially when things are getting bad, it's always good to have your expertise. Bob?
Thanks, Bob.